There are places on this earth where logic fades, and reality begins to rot around the edges. Places people speak of in hushed tones, warning others to never go alone, and never after dark. One of those places is deep within the Ozark Mountains, in a desolate area known to locals as Devil's Den. What you're about to hear is a true horror story pieced together from journal entries, police reports, eyewitness accounts, and disturbing recovered footage. This is not a tale for the faint of heart. It's the chronicle of 6 hikers, a remote trail, and a nightmarish disappearance that still defies all explanation to this day. The mysterious disappearance at Devil's Den is not just a ghost story, it's a warning, a terrifying account of what happens when something ancient, malevolent, and beyond human understanding is disturbed. But before we begin, I have a question for you. If someone you loved vanished in a place with a dark history, would you dare go after them, or would you let the legends keep them? Drop your answer in the comments below. I really want to know what you would do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if you enjoy a good chill down your spine. Trust me, this is just the beginning. And by the time we're done, you'll never look at the woods the same way again. The air was dry that morning, a strange kind of dry that made the inside of your nose itch, like something in the forest was watching and holding its breath. It was early May. 6 friends, all college students from Missouri State University, had packed their gear for what was supposed to be a 3-day backpacking trip into the Ozark National Forest. They had no idea what they were walking into. There was Tyler Knox, the unofficial leader of the group, strong, cocky, a survivalist at heart. He had done this trail once before and swore by the views. His girlfriend Jade Holloway, a photography major, came mostly for the thrill of getting unique shots for her thesis, and to keep an eye on Tyler. Marcus Mars Lyle was the joker, always cracking jokes at the worst times. His twin sister Emily, quieter but smarter than the rest, was tagging along to keep Mars out of trouble. Then there was Caleb Morris, a med student with anxiety issues, and Lena Brooks, skeptic, fiercely logical, and the one person who repeatedly said, "Devil's Den. Seriously, that's just a name, right?" They set out from the trailhead around 10:30 a.m., joking, laughing, loaded down with gear and snacks. The first few miles were stunning, sun-dappled woods, birdsong echoing through the trees, and that sense of adventure only the young can feel. But as they reached deeper into the forest, an uneasy quiet began to settle over them. The laughter stopped, replaced by the soft crunch of boots on dry leaves. It started with the map. Tyler pulled out his folded, laminated trail map, the one he'd used 2 years ago. But something wasn't right. "Wait," he muttered, flipping it over. Then again, "This junction, the rock formation, should be here. Right here." "Maybe you folded it wrong," Emily offered, pulling out her phone to check the GPS. No signal. Lena checked hers, nothing. Jade raised her camera and took a wide shot of the forest. "We're not lost. The trail's right there." But the trail wasn't there. It had slowly narrowed over the last half hour until it had completely disappeared, swallowed by underbrush and wild growth. There were no markings, no blazes on the trees, no sign that this was ever a designated path. And then the buzzing began. It was faint at first, like a distant wasp nest, but it grew louder the further they moved. A sickening, electric hum that vibrated in their bones. Mars covered his ears and shouted, "Jesus, what is that?" But the others didn't seem to hear it. "You don't hear that?" he said, eyes wide. "It's like it's inside my skull." Then he stopped mid-step, swaying. He gripped a tree trunk like he was going to fall, then vomited into the underbrush. Caleb rushed to him. "You okay?" "I saw something," Mars whispered. "Just now, in the trees. Black eyes. No face." "Man, you're just dehydrated," Tyler said, annoyed. "Let's keep moving. We'll find the trail again and make camp. There's a clearing just past the ridge." They never found the clearing. Instead, they stumbled into a deep ravine, a hollow surrounded by sharp, mossy rocks. The descent was steep, almost unnatural, as if something had caved in long ago. At the bottom lay a crumbling stone structure, overgrown, ancient. A square slab of black rock jutted from the center, covered in moss, with strange carvings worn almost smooth. "I don't remember this being here," Tyler murmured. This wasn't here last time." Because we're not on the same trail, Tyler, Lena snapped. This is not on any maps. Jade raised her camera and snapped a photo of the slab. It looks like some kind of altar. Nope, Caleb muttered. We're leaving. Now. But none of them moved. It wasn't that they didn't want to. It was like something held them in place. A thick pressure in the air, like the forest itself had leaned in to listen. Birds had stopped chirping. Even the wind had died. Emily's eyes were locked on the carving. These symbols, they look like something out of Mesopotamian mythology, but distorted. Mars laughed nervously, still pale. Great. Devil's den and now Satan's coffee table. Can we please leave before something? A scream tore through the ravine. It was high-pitched, wet, and not human. It echoed from the trees, bounced off the rocks, and froze them all in place. Jade dropped her camera. It shattered on the stone. What was that? Caleb gasped, voice shaking. No one answered. Then, movement. Behind the trees, up on the ridge, a flicker, tall, humanoid, hunched. Something with two long limbs and no clear face. It was there for a heartbeat, then gone. They scrambled up the ridge. Adrenaline replacing fear. Branches snapped underfoot. Thorns tore at their clothes, but no one dared stop. Tyler shouted, "Keep moving. Don't look back," but Caleb did. He froze mid-climb, eyes widening as he stared down into the hollow. Something moved at the base of the altar. A shifting shadow, oozing up like smoke. It took shape briefly, into a face, wide, stretched, with hollow pits for eyes. "Go," Lena screamed, yanking him by the pack. They ran until the light changed. That was the strangest. The sun had been high before. Now, it hung low, the forest tinted orange and gold as if several hours had passed in minutes. Birds chirped again, but slower, off. They emerged into another clearing, this one dry and brittle like the ground hadn't seen water in years. The trees were wrong too, bent in toward each other like skeletal fingers. A breeze moved through them, and with it came the scent of copper and rot. Jade spoke first, voice trembling. We weren't down there that long, were we?" No one answered. Lena dropped to her knees, hands shaking, and opened her compass. The needle spun wildly, refusing to settle. Tyler looked back toward the woods, jaw clenched. "Okay, something's not right. We'll set camp here for now. Regroup. And tomorrow, we head straight north, even if we have to cut through brush." That night, no one slept. And just before dawn, Caleb wandered from his tent, eyes wide, lips moving silently, and disappeared into the tree. When they discovered Caleb was missing, it was the cold that hit them first. Not the usual chill of an early morning, but something unnatural, deep, a bite that sank straight into their bones. They found his tent still pitched, his pack lying open and undisturbed. His boots, however, were gone. "Where the hell is he?" Mars asked, his voice strained with panic. He scrambled out of his tent, eyes darting toward the edges of the forest. "Caleb," he shouted, "stop screwing around." Tyler took a breath, trying to steady himself. This wasn't like Caleb. The kid had anxiety. Sure, but he was always careful. He would never just wander off. Emily and Lena were already searching, their flashlights cutting through the fog that clung to the ground. The air was thick with a low, reverberating hum that seemed to vibrate through the soil itself. It was the same buzzing sound they had heard yesterday, though now it was louder, almost deafening, like a swarm of insects had taken residence inside their skulls. "Do you hear that?" Jade asked, voice shaky. Her camera was still hanging around her neck, though her hands were trembling too much to lift it. "Yeah," Tyler muttered, his hand brushing against the map again, as if hoping it might offer some answers. "We need to find him before, whatever this is, gets worse." The forest felt wrong. Even as they began to search the surrounding trees and brush, the world around them seemed to shift. The wind picked up, but the leaves barely rustled. Everything was still, as if they were the only living things left in a forgotten world. After what felt like hours, Mars's voice cracked through the silence. "I found something." They rushed over, and there in the mud, near a cluster of gnarled roots, was Caleb's phone. It was cracked, its screen smeared with what looked like blood, but there was no body, no sign of him at all. "Where the hell is he?" Emily whispered, voice strained with fear. Tyler knelt down, picking up the phone. As soon as he touched it, the screen flickered to life, flashing a dark, grainy video. "Look at this," he said, showing the others. The video was shaky, the camera jerking wildly, but it was clear enough. They could see Caleb, pale, wild-eyed, standing at the edge of a cliff. His lips moved, but his voice was distorted, garbled. Then the camera swung down to the ground, and they saw something else. A twisted, dark shape, hunched and crawling, moving in jerky, unnatural motions toward Caleb. It was hard to make out, but the shape was taller than any human, with limbs too long, its body contorted in a grotesque fashion. "Stop it," Caleb's voice came through, pleading. "Stop following me. What do you want?" The screen flickered again, and the figure was suddenly gone. The next shot was a blur, and then, just before the video cut out, they saw Caleb stumbling backward, his feet slipping on the wet earth, before the phone went dark. The silence was broken only by Mars, who swore loudly, "We need to find him, now." Tyler's hands clenched into fists. He didn't know what they were dealing with, but this wasn't a prank. Caleb wasn't the type to scare easily, and he didn't disappear without a trace. Not like this. "Let's move," he said, turning sharply toward the tree. They moved quickly, their steps heavy, breathing shallow as they followed the faint trail Caleb had left. The buzz in the air seemed to intensify, wrapping around them like an unseen presence, pressuring their minds, digging into their thought. Every few moments the air would turn colder, colder than it should have been, like they were being drawn deeper into the forest's unseen heart. Then they reached it. It was the same clearing they'd passed through the day before, the one with the strange ancient altar. But now, something was different. The atmosphere had thickened, and the sense of unease was palpable. Lena felt it first. "Something's wrong." The others froze, looking around. The air had turned putrid, thick with the smell of decay. The stone altar that had seemed ancient and harmless yesterday now looked alive. "Let's turn around," Jade whispered, stepping back. But Tyler was already moving forward. "No," he said quietly. "We keep going. Caleb could be here." They stepped into the clearing, but as soon as they did, the buzzing noise stopped. Dead silence. It was then that they heard it. A faint whisper, so quiet that it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Leave." Lena's face went pale. She whipped around, scanning the trees behind them. "Did anyone else hear that?" Jade gripped her camera, too terrified to speak, while Emily shivered, clutching her arms. "We need to get out of here. This place is cursed." Tyler shook his head. "No. We're not leaving without Caleb." Suddenly the ground beneath their feet trembled. A rumble, deep and unnatural, coursed through the earth. Like a warning, the trees around them began to bend, their limbs twisting as though they had a mind of their own. From the edge of the clearing they could hear something heavy dragging across the earth. The sound of something moving, something big. The first shadow appeared in the trees. It wasn't the same thing they had seen on Caleb's phone. This was worse, more real. It was a massive, misshapen figure, its skin stretched thin over its bones. The limbs were wrong, twisted, with sharp, jagged angles. It seemed to flow like smoke, its form not quite solid, but solid enough to send a deep terror into their heart. The thing paused, a terrible hiss escaping from its mouth, a sound that rattled their bones. Tyler raised his voice, trying to sound confident. "Caleb, if you're out here, we're coming for you." But there was no answer, only the thing creeping closer, its eyes hollow black pits that seemed to pull in the very light. Mars grabbed Tyler's arm. "What the hell is that?" "We have to go," Lena said, her voice trembling. "Now." But they didn't move. They could. The creature's presence was paralyzing. Each step it took more suffocating than the last. The whispers grew louder. "Leave." And then, it reached out. The creature's hand, if it could even be called that, reached out with an unnatural jerking motion, fingers elongated, claws scraping against the ground. It was too close, far too close. The sickly hum in the air intensified, vibrating through their ribs and rattling their teeth. Tyler was the first to move. He shoved Mars aside, grabbed Jade's wrist and yanked her forward. "Run!" he shouted. They didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted, pushing through the underbrush, barely hearing the screams of terror rising behind them. The ground beneath their feet was soft and treacherous, roots and rocks, threatening to trip them at every step. The air felt thick, as if it was pressing in from all sides, suffocating them. But the creature, whatever it was faster. Tyler turned his head just in time to see it lunge, its form a blur in the trees. There was a shrill screech that echoed through the forest, sharp and inhuman, and something cold brushed the back of his neck. He didn't look back. He couldn't. "Keep going," Tyler yelled again, pushing harder, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever had followed them from the altar. Mars was panting, barely able to keep up. His usual bravado was gone, replaced with sheer panic. "This isn't happening. This isn't real," he cried, voice cracking. "Keep it together, Mars," Emily snapped, her voice tight with fear. "We have to move. Now." They burst through a thicket and into another clearing, but it didn't offer the relief they were hoping for. In fact, it only made the terror worse. Standing in the center of the clearing, facing them, was Caleb. At least, it looked like Caleb. His body was twisted, like his limbs had been bent at unnatural angles, his skin ashen and slick with sweat. His eyes were wide, bloodshot and empty. His mouth was slack, hanging open like a puppet with its strings cut. The moment they laid eyes on him, something in the air shifted, a nauseating pressure that made their stomachs churn. "Caleb!" Jade screamed, her voice breaking. Caleb, or whatever was left of him, raised his head slowly, as if the action pained him. His eyes locked onto them, and for a moment there was a flicker of recognition, a flash of the friend they had known. But then it was gone. His mouth opened again, but instead of Caleb's voice, it was the same hissing whisper they had heard earlier. "Leave." "No," Tyler muttered, shaking his head. "This isn't him. This isn't Caleb." Mars stumbled backward, eyes wide with fear. "What the hell is happening here?" "We can't stop," Emily said, her voice shaking. "We need to keep moving. Don't engage. He's not Caleb anymore." But it was too late. Caleb's head snapped back violently, his neck creaking as it twisted unnaturally. His body began to twitch, jerking in a way that shouldn't have been possible. The air around them seemed to warble, the ground beneath their feet shifting, like it was trying to swallow them whole. "Leave!" The voice was no longer Caleb's. It was the same guttural, distorted tone they had heard from the creature in the trees. And in that moment, they all understood. Whatever had taken Caleb had consumed him, twisted him into something far worse. Tyler raised his flashlight and shined it in Caleb's direction. The beam illuminated his face, but as the light hit him, something horrifying happened. His face melted. The flesh began to sag, oozing like thick tar, until what remained was a grotesque, warped version of Caleb's form. The eyes sank into the sockets, leaving dark, empty voids, and the mouth stretched impossibly wide, wide enough to let out a terrible, ear-splitting scream. "Run!" Tyler shouted, his voice frantic, filled with raw fear. They turned and ran, faster than they had before, the terror now coursing through them with the force of a storm. The sound of their footfalls was drowned out by the shrieking wails that echoed behind them. They were being hunted. But by what? The shadows that once seemed benign were now alive, twisting and swirling in the corner of their vision. The trees seemed to lean closer with each passing step, their branches snapping like dry bone, and overhead the sky had darkened, the sun hidden behind clouds that moved unnaturally fast. Blotting out the light, Emily's heart raced. "We have to get out of here. Where's the trail? Where's the way out?" Tyler's breath was ragged as he glanced over his shoulder. The creature, that thing, was still following them. It moved with an unsettling fluidity, its body stretching and shrinking, adapting to every movement they made. The woods seemed to fold around it, bending to its will. It was as if the forest itself was a living thing, and it was working with the creature to trap them. "Over here," Lena cried, pointing to a gap between two trees. "The trail, we can reach it if we..." Before she could finish, there was a crash behind them. The ground shook again, and a series of blood-curdling screeches filled the air. Tyler whipped around, his heart stopping in his chest. In the center of the clearing, Standing tall and unnaturally still was the creature. It was no longer just a shadow, no longer a distorted shape. It was fully there. Tall, humanoid, with legs that twisted like tree roots, and arms that reached down to the ground like massive tendrils. Its head was a mass of shifting darkness, but its eyes, those hollow, bottomless pits, stared directly at them. The world seemed to grow colder. The buzzing noise intensified, vibrating through their bones. No, no, Jade whispered, her voice barely audible as she stumbled backward. This isn't happening. This isn't real. But it was real, and it was closing in. Tyler's mind raced. He had no plan, no escape route. They had to do something, anything, before they were trapped here forever. But as the creature stepped forward, the ground trembled again, and a low, unnatural growl echoed from the depths of the forest. Something else was coming. The growl was like nothing they had ever heard before. It rumbled through the trees, deep and guttural, sending waves of fear through their chests. The ground beneath their feet shook once more, the air growing thick with a heavy, suffocating pressure. The creature before them, the one that had taken Caleb, wasn't alone anymore. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest, his body frozen in place. He had never imagined anything like this. Never. From the shadows, another figure emerged. It was larger, much larger, and far more terrifying. This creature was massive, its form towering over the others, with a body that seemed to pulse with an eerie, otherworldly energy. The way it moved was unnatural, too smooth, as if it was gliding rather than walking. Its skin was pale like the color of death itself, and its eyes, they were like mirrors, black and reflective, pulling in the surrounding light and casting nothing back. The second creature's face was almost featureless, save for two wide slits where its nose should have been, and a gaping, sharp-toothed grin that stretched far too wide for comfort. "What is that?" Mars whispered, his voice trembling as he clung to the nearest tree for support. "What the hell are they?" Tyler's mind raced. His survival instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He was paralyzed as if the forest itself had reached into him, twisting his very bones. "Run!" Lena shouted, pushing him forward. Her voice broke through his trance, and he snapped to attention. He grabbed Jade's hand and yanked her along, but they were already too late. The giant creature was moving faster than they could comprehend. It let out another low growl, and the trees around them seemed to buckle under the weight of its presence. "Move!" Tyler barked. They ran again, but the forest was closing in on them, the trees seeming to fold together, blocking their path, forming a maze of twisting branches. The buzzing noise had turned into something far worse, a shrieking, almost deafening sound that echoed from all directions. The air felt like it was compressing, the weight of it pushing them down, making it harder to breathe with every step. "We're not going to make it," Emily gasped, her face pale. Her body was beginning to shake, the terror finally catching up with her. "There's no way out of this place." "Don't say that," Mars hissed, still moving, but stumbling. He was barely able to keep up, his breath shallow and panicked. "We have to make it out of here." But Tyler's eyes darted around and a horrible realization dawned on him. They had been running for what felt like hours, but they hadn't gone anywhere. They were stuck in a loop. Every turn led them back to the same spot, the same clearing, the same terrifying creatures. It was as if the forest itself had turned against them, trapping them in some kind of nightmare. We're trapped," Tyler muttered, barely able to form the words. "This can't be real. This can't be happening." Lena, always the one to think things through, was breathing heavily, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She clutched the compass in her hand, but it was spinning wildly, unable to settle on any direction. "Is it the forest?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Is the forest alive?" Before anyone could answer, the ground shook again. The earth trembled beneath their feet, the trees groaning as if they were alive, as if something deep below was stirring. And then they heard it, the sound of footsteps. Not from the creatures, not from the tree, from behind them. They turned, and there, standing at the edge of the clearing, was Caleb. For a moment, they all froze. It was him, the real Caleb. He was standing there, looking disheveled and broken, his eyes wide with panic. His clothes were torn, his face pale as if he had been running for his life. "Caleb," Jade shouted, relief flooding her chest. "You're okay." But Caleb didn't move. He just stood there, staring at them with wide, unblinking eyes. "Caleb," Emily called again, her voice tight with fear. "Are you?" His head snapped to the side, his eyes narrowing into something far darker, something inhuman. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, Caleb vanished. The air went still. Too still. "What the hell was that?" Mars shouted, his voice rising to a near scream. "That was him. That was really him." "No," Tyler said, shaking his head. "That wasn't him. That wasn't Caleb." They had barely registered what had happened when the ground beneath them gave way. It was as if the forest itself had decided it had enough of them. Tyler was the first to fall, his legs buckling as the earth cracked open, splitting wide like some massive, hungry mouth. He reached out, trying to grab something, anything, but his hands found only air. He was falling. The world around him was spinning, the trees above him becoming distant shapes that blurred into the darkness. He hit the ground hard. For a moment, everything went black. When Tyler opened his eyes, the world was upside down. His body ached, his head throbbed with a dull, relentless pain. But he forced himself to sit up, shaking his head to clear the fog. The air was damp, and the darkness felt suffocating, as if the night itself had wrapped its cold fingers around him. Jade's voice was faint, coming from somewhere nearby. He strained his eyes, trying to locate her. "Jade," he croaked. A shape emerged from the darkness. It was her stumbling toward him, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everyone, they're gone." Tyler's heart skipped a beat. "What? What do you mean?" "I don't know," Jade said, shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "I woke up, and they weren't here. Lena, Mars, Emily, gone, just gone." A cold chill crept down Tyler's spine. They weren't alone anymore. The forest had changed. It was no longer the place they had entered. The trees had grown taller, twisted, in unnatural shapes. The air was thick with a heavy, oppressive feeling that made it hard to breathe. Every sound seemed muffled, as though they were trapped in some kind of void. "Something's wrong," Jade said, her voice trembling. "This place, it's alive, and it's hungry." And then, from the darkness around them, they heard a noise, faint at first, but growing louder. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and growing closer. The creatures were back. Tyler's pulse hammered in his ears. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, to get away from the dark forest and the things that stalked them. But his legs were stiff, heavy, unwilling to move. He could hear the footsteps now, slow, deliberate, but unmistakable in their presence. There was something else too, a sound far more chilling than the footfalls, a low, wet dragging like something heavy scraping across the ground. "Jade, we need to move," Tyler whispered, his voice barely audible, his throat dry as if all the moisture had been drained from it. Jade nodded, her eyes wide with terror. But as she turned, her foot caught on a root, sending her sprawling to the ground with a sharp gasp. Tyler reached out instinctively to catch her, but the ground beneath them shook again, harder this time, and they both stumbled forward, crashing into the dirt. It was then that Tyler saw it. The thing that had been following them, the one from the clearing, emerged from the shadows. Its massive form seemed to fill the space around them, its head craned low as if it were peering directly into their souls. Its eyes, hollow and bottomless, flickered with an unnatural, eerie light. The creature's movements were fluid, serpentine, its long limbs stretching unnaturally with every step it took. "Get up," Tyler shouted, grabbing Jade's arm and pulling her to her feet. "We can't stop now, we need to run." But Jade was frozen. She stared, wide-eyed at the creature as it moved closer, its long clawed hands dragging along the ground, leaving deep furrows in the dirt. There was something about its presence, something that made every instinct in her scream to stay still, to not provoke it. The creature tilted its head, studying them for a moment before it made its move. Tyler had no time to think. He yanked Jade away, pulling her into a sprint. Behind them, the creature let out a low growl, a sound that reverberated through their chests, paralyzing them in its way. But the noise wasn't what stopped them. It was the ground beneath their feet. The earth trembled again, this time with a force that sent them crashing to the ground. The trees around them swayed violently, their branches twisting and bending as if they were alive, reaching out, wanting to trap them. Tyler's heart was racing, his breathing ragged. He forced himself up, pulling Jade with him, but the world around them seemed to collapse. The sound of footsteps of dragging limbs grew louder, drowning out everything else. "We can't outrun it," Jade gasped, her face pale with fear. Her hand gripped Tyler's arm like a lifeline. "It's too fast. It'll catch us." Tyler didn't answer. His mind was too scrambled, the overwhelming terror drowning out any coherent thoughts. He scanned their surroundings, desperate for any kind of escape. The trees, once comforting in their natural beauty, now seemed like towering monsters, their trunks twisted into grotesque shape. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to go. But there was something else. The shadows. The trees. They were moving, shifting in the corner of his vision, curling inward like they were closing off their only route of escape. The entire forest seemed to be alive, a malevolent force that was hunting them. "Tyler!" Jade's voice broke through his thoughts. She was looking toward the center of the clearing. At first, Tyler didn't understand what she was pointing at, but then his gaze fell on it, a flicker of movement at the very heart of the dark woods. It was a figure. At first he thought it was another one of the creatures. But no, this one was different. It was human, at least it looked human. It was Caleb. But this wasn't the Caleb they had known. This Caleb was gaunt, his skin pale and stretched tightly over his bones. His eyes were hollow, his body trembling as though it couldn't hold itself together. The only thing that was familiar was the tattered clothes hanging loosely from his frame. But his movements were unnaturally stiff, jerking and twitching like he was being controlled by something beyond his control. "Caleb!" Jade shouted, her voice cracked with emotion. "What happened to you?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, Caleb, or whatever was left of him, raised his hand, pointing into the forest. His mouth opened, but instead of words a low, gravelly moan escaped, a sound like dry leaves scraping against stone. Tyler's mind raced. Was this still Caleb, or was it another twisted manifestation of whatever haunted this place? Suddenly, Caleb's head snapped back, his eyes flashing with something other than recognition. His lips peeled back into a twisted grin, a grotesque inhuman grin that made Tyler's stomach churn. "Run!" Caleb's voice, or what was left of it, croaked. But it wasn't a warning. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. Before they could react, the figure vanished, disappearing into the darkness, as quickly as it had appeared. "What the hell is going on here?" Tyler shouted, his voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "What is that thing? What happened to Caleb?" Jade didn't answer. She was staring at the spot where Caleb had been, her face pale and stricken with shock. The creatures, the monsters, whatever they were closing in, their grotesque forms slithering through the underbrush, dragging their twisted limbs behind them. Tyler grabbed Jade's hand again, yanking her toward him. "We need to go now." But as they turned to run, the ground shook once more, and an eerie, shrill wail filled the air. The trees around them seemed to split open, revealing an even darker abyss beyond. From the shadows, something stepped out, something even more monstrous than before. It was the second creature, the giant one, the one that had followed them from the clearing. It was now fully visible, and as it stepped forward, its presence sucked the light from the air. Its massive limbs bent and twitched, and its hollow eyes glowed with an unnatural fire. Tyler's body froze again. They had no escape, no chance of outrunning it. This wasn't just the forest. This wasn't just a nightmare. This was a trap, and they had fallen right into it. The air around them grew thick, suffocating. The creature's eyes glowed with an unearthly light, and as it stepped forward, the earth seemed to shudder beneath its weight. The trees creaked and groaned as though they were being bent under the pressure of its presence. Tyler could feel his heart racing, but his legs were frozen, his body refusing to obey his commands. "Tyler, What do we do? Jade's voice was barely above a whisper, her grip on his arm tightening as she clung to him. Tyler didn't have an answer. He wanted to move, to run, but every part of his body was paralyzed by the overwhelming sense of dread that filled the air. The creature was closing in on them, its massive, twisted form blocking any possible escape. It didn't make a sound as it moved, but Tyler could hear the rustling of leaves, the faint scraping of its claws against the ground, the buzzing noise, that low, pulsating hum that had been present since the moment they stepped into this cursed forest was now louder than ever, almost deafening. "We're not going to make it," Jade whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Tyler could barely hear her over the rising cacophony in his head. It was as if the forest itself was alive, its heartbeat syncing with the creature's own, thumping in time with the frantic rhythm of his pulse. Then from behind them a sudden, sharp scream echoed through the forest. It was Mars. Tyler spun around, his heart sinking. In the distance he could just make out Mars's silhouette, struggling against something that wasn't human. "No!" Tyler shouted, his voice hoarse. "Mars!" But before they could move, the giant creature lunged forward, its claws raking the ground as it closed the distance between them in the blink of an eye. A terrible, deafening shriek filled the air as the beast collided with a nearby tree, its twisted limbs knocking it over with ease. "Mars!" Jade screamed again. But Tyler could see the hopelessness in her eyes. There was no way they could reach him in time. The creature turned its gaze toward them, its hollow eyes locking with Tyler's. There was something ancient in that gaze, something older than the forest itself. It was as if it knew everything about them, every secret they had ever kept. It was as if it had been watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then the air shifted. The creature's body rippled, its form warping and stretching unnaturally, as though it were made of shadows rather than flesh. Its head snapped back at an impossible angle, and its mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth that seemed to stretch on forever. Tyler's stomach churned. This thing wasn't real, it couldn't be real, but the terror that coursed through his veins told him otherwise. And then, as if in response to his thoughts, the ground around them began to shift once more. The trees twisted and bent, their branches snapping in the wind as if they were alive, and the earth itself seemed to open up beneath their feet. "What's happening?" Jade whispered, her voice trembling. Tyler didn't have time to answer. The ground split open with a deafening crack, and the two of them were sent tumbling into the darkness below. They were surrounded by darkness, complete, impenetrable darkness. There was no sky, no trees, no ground, just an endless void that stretched out in every direction. The air was cold and stale, and the silence was so complete it felt like it was pressing in on them. "Where are we?" Jade's voice trembled, the fear in it palpable. Tyler didn't know. He couldn't see anything, couldn't even hear the creatures anymore. It was as if they had been pulled into a different world entirely. The stillness was oppressive, like the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting for something. A low, humming sound filled the void, distant at first, but growing louder. It was the same buzzing noise, but now it was deeper, more resonant, as though it was coming from beneath the ground, or maybe from inside their minds. Tyler turned to Jade, his face pale with fear. "We need to find a way out. We can't stay here." Jade nodded, but her expression was clouded with doubt. "But how? We don't even know where here is." Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a flicker of light appeared in the distance. It was faint, barely visible at first, but it grew brighter with every passing second. Tyler's heart skipped a beat. Was this an exit? A way out of this nightmare? Without thinking, he grabbed Jade's hand and started moving toward it. Every step felt like it took them further away from the nightmare they had already lived through. But the light was still too far, just out of reach. And the buzzing, it was growing loud. "Stay close," Tyler whispered, his grip tightening on her hand. As they moved forward, the darkness began to pulse around them, the air heavy with the weight of something ancient, something malevolent. It was as if the very essence of the place, this thing they had fallen into, was alive, aware of them, watching them. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, The light flickered once more. Only this time, it wasn't alone. Figures emerged from the darkness, emerging one by one, from all sides. They were distorted, their bodies twisted and broken, their faces frozen in expressions of eternal agony. They moved in jerky, unnatural motions, their eyes glowing faintly with an eerie, unholy light. "No, no," Jade screamed, her voice cracking as the figures surrounded them. Tyler tried to push forward, but the air was thick, pressing in on him from all sides. The figures were getting closer, their mouths opening in a silent scream. Their eyes were all the same, hollow, empty, dead. The light in the distance flickered again, and Tyler realized with a sinking feeling that the light wasn't an escape. It was a trap. Tyler's heart hammered in his chest as the figures closed in on them. The darkness around them thickened, swallowing any trace of light, until the void felt like it was pressing against his very skin. The figures, grotesque, twisted shadows of what might once have been human, shuffled toward them in jerky, unnatural movements, their eyes glowing with a sickly, unnatural light. "Tyler, we're not going to survive this," Jade's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. Her grip on his hand was weak now, as if the weight of the darkness was too much to bear. "No," Tyler said, his voice tight, determined. "We will survive this." But even as he spoke, the truth of their situation sank in. The light in the distance was no escape. It was a lure, a trap designed to draw them further into the depths of this place. They had fallen into something ancient, a place that didn't obey the laws of nature. They were trapped in a nightmare, and no matter how hard they tried to run, there was nowhere to go. The figures were now so close that Tyler could see the grotesque details of their faces. Their eyes were wide, empty, pools of darkness that seemed to draw him in, as if they were trying to pull him into their void. Their mouths hung open, but no sound came from them. Just the eerie, hollow echo of something that should have never existed. Jade stumbled backward, her face pale with terror. "Tyler, we have to get out of here, please." But before Tyler could respond, the light flickered once more, brighter this time. A flash, almost blinding, lit up the surrounding void. For a brief moment, the darkness seemed to pull back, and in that instant, Tyler saw something that sent a chill down his spine. Standing at the edge of the light was Caleb. He was standing motionless, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring directly at them. His face was gaunt, his features distorted, but it was unmistakably him, the same Caleb they had known, or at least what was left of him. "Caleb," Tyler shouted, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You're alive." But Caleb didn't respond. His mouth opened, but the words that came out were not his own. The voice that filled the air was a low, rumbling growl, an inhuman sound that made the hair on the back of Tyler's neck stand on end. "Run," the voice said. But it was not Caleb's voice. It was something else, something older, something that had been waiting for them. Before Tyler could react, the light flickered again, and the world around them seemed to warp and twist. The figures, the shadows, began to close in, moving faster now, their limbs stretching unnaturally long. Tyler's mind reeled, and he felt the overwhelming sense of dread settle in his chest, like a weight too heavy to bear. "We have to go now," Tyler shouted, pulling Jade with him. But as he turned to run, the ground beneath them shook again, this time with a violent force that sent them both crashing to the ground. The light in the distance flickered again, but this time it was no longer a beacon. It was a warning. The figures were upon them now, their movements swift, their hands reaching out with claws that looked sharp enough to tear through flesh. Tyler's stomach dropped as he realized there was nowhere to go. They were surrounded. The walls of the void were closing in on them, the figures pressing in from all sides. Jade's scream was cut off as one of the creatures lunged at her, its claws sinking into her arm. Tyler tried to reach out, but his body was too slow. The figure dragged Jade away, her terrified eyes locked on his. "No," Tyler screamed, reaching for her, but his hand grasped only empty air. The creature's grip on her tightened, and Tyler watched, helpless, as it pulled her deeper into the darkness. She vanished from sight, her screams echoing in his mind. It was then that Tyler realized there was no escape. Not for him, not for Jade, not for any of them. This place, this thing they had stumbled into, was a lie. It was a trap designed to consume them, to swallow them whole, to tear them apart until there was nothing left. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to gather his thoughts. His body was trembling, his breath ragged, but he couldn't give up. Not yet. There had to be a way out. There had to be something they could do. And then, as if in response to his thoughts, the ground trembled once more. The air around them grew even heavier, the darkness closing in tighter. But in the distance, there was another sound, something different from the screeching of the figure. It was a voice, a whisper, soft at first, but growing louder. You were never meant to leave. Tyler's breath caught in his throat. The voice echoed through the void, as though it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And then, with a sudden burst of clarity, Tyler understood. This place was not just a forest. It was not just a nightmare. It was a prison, an ancient, forgotten prison. The creatures, the figures, the twisted versions of their friends, they were all trapped here, just like him. And the darkness, the void, that was the heart of the prison. It was the source, the thing that kept them trapped, that kept them in an endless cycle of terror and despair. And just like Caleb, they had been chosen to become part of it. You can't escape. The voice was louder now, and Tyler could feel its power pressing against him like a suffocating weight. The creatures were closing in again, their claws reaching out, their mouths opening wide. Tyler had no choice. With a final scream, he lunged toward the light. It wasn't a way out, it was the end. Did they escape, or become part of the forest's cursed past? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more spine-chilling stories to keep you up at night.